At 20 years old, Alexander inherited a throne stained with his father's blood and surrounded by betrayal. He did not ask for safety. He declared war on the world. In 334 BC, he drove his spile of Asia and announced the beginning of Macedonian annihilation. With an army that did not understand fear, he stormed the Granicus River and shattered the Persian satraps, sending one come-to-clear message: he to rip imperial crowns from their roots. At Gordium, he faced a knot that had defeated kings for generations. He did not waste time trying to solve it. With one decisive strike, he cut through it, proving that rules are followed by ordinary men but broken by those who shape history. In 333 BC, the horror of Issus exploded, faced river of blood. And despite various 30 day, and despite Sir's overwhelming numbers, he drove like a storm into the heart of the army, and great King Flee abandoned his family to Macedonian victory. The island city of Tyre defied him. So Alexander chose to bend the sea itself to his will. In 32 BC, he built a road through water and stormed the impossible, proving that even oceans could not protect those who stood against him. In 3032 BC, Alexander entered Egypt, not as a foreign invader, but like a chosen force of destiny. In Memphis, he was crowned pharaoh, and on the edge of the Nile world, he planted Alexandria, a city built not to survive history, but to replace it. On October 1st, 3031 BC, the decisive moment came at Gaugamela. Facing a vast Persian army on open ground with calculated precision, turning centering imperial power into collapse, and forcing Darius to abandon his empire forever. He entered Babylon in triumph and seized the legendary treasures of Susa, becoming richer than ruler alive. But Alexander was gathering gold. He was gathering the instruments of absolute power, turning centuries of Persian wealth into fuel for an empire that refused to stop. In 330 BC, entered Persepolis and set its royal palaces on fire. The flames did not just consume a city. They marked the end of the Persian Empire and the birth of a new order under his command. He hunted Darius until he found him dead at the hands of traitors. And with the great king gone, did not just inherit a throne, he stepped into the role of King of Kings, shaping himself into something larger than conquest. The final hour empire have passed. Alexander, to arrive late to kill he wanted to between 329 and 327 BC, marched into the deadly mountains of Central Asia, where no army could enemy surrendered, in Bactria and Sogdiana, and fought brutal war of resistance, and forged his empire, not victory alone. This is not a place where armies win easily, this is where armies break. In 3027 BC, turned toward India, a land no Greek king had ever entered. With a world army behind him, he crossed the Hindu Kush and smashed through mountain strongholds, driving toward the edge of the known world, as if no Horrended was allowed to resist him. In 3026 BC, at the Hydaspes River, Alexander faced King Porus and the most dangerous battles of his life. In storm and darkness, the river broke the giant beasts and proved that no force on earth was beyond his stopped reach. The world kept inventing new ways to keep finding ways. At the Hydaspes River, his army refused to march any farther. Alexander did not stop because the world had ended. He stopped because even the men who conquered it with him could no longer follow where his ambition wanted to go. That makes this wave more dangerous than many battles. The march through Gedrosia became a living nightmare. Men died of thirst, animals collapsed in the sand, and the desert seemed determined to erase the army entirely. But Alexander walked through it with them, refusing even water unless his soldiers could army. But it could not erase Matt, the man still walking that it said. 324 BC, Alexander staged the mass weddings at Susa, marrying thousands of Macedonians to Persian women, a single imperial ceremony. It was not romance, it was social engineering on a civilization scale, an attempt to fuse East and West into one empire under his name. A ruler is using marriage as a weapon more than bloodline. When Hephaestion died, something inside Alexander broke with him. He executed physicians, unleashed his grief on the world, and returned to carrying a rage so deep that even Empire Mephalti itself could no longer contain it. The empire is still huge, but he no longer fits it the same way. In June 323 BC, Alexander fell ill in Babylon and spent 12 days fighting death in silence. And when his generals asked who would inherit empire, he gave an answer so lethal, it shattered the future with the single word. Alex died at 33, but in one lifetime he did what whole civilization failed to do in centuries. He never lost a battle, shattered the greatest empire on earth, founded cities across continents, and turned his name into the permanent measure of impossible ambition. He ruled for barely 12 years, yet his impact lasted for centuries. He erased distance, reshaped trade, connected civilizations, and left behind a world would never return to what it was before him. Alexander did right how it moves. He changed how the world functions. At Guamala, Alexander faced the full military weight of Persia. Scyth-Karmiot's massed cavalry and an army built to crush him in the open, but in one split the heart of the realm in the empire and sent its king fleeing into the night. The empire was split open where everyone could see. After Gaugamela, Babylon and Susa opened before him, and the wealth of the Persian world began falling into his hands. But Alan did stop at not treasure. He marched on Persepolis, determined not just gold, but not just a polis, to intercede the sacred center of an empire that ruled the east for the... In 330 BC, Alexander set the palaces of Persepolis on fire. What burned that night was not just stone and timber, it was the ceremonial soul of the Persian Empire, collapsing into smoke as he watched the old world die in flames. He hunted Darius until the empire gave him a corpse instead of a crown. And with the last great king dead, Alexander did not just inherit Persia, he stepped into its throne, its rituals, and its sacred language of power, becoming something more Conqueror, ruler who intended to replace the world he had destroyed. Between 329 and 327 BC in the Phrasan Mountains of Bactria and Sogdiana answered faced an enemy that would not stand and would not surrender. Crafted with immense resistance piece by piece, the mountains refuse him. You cannot, the truth was that you fight from cannot catch. If the war becomes a grinding control of land that refuses to be owned. In the summer of 1327 BC, a land toward India landed no Greek king had ever reached. He crossed the Hindu Kush with an army made conquered worlds, smashing mountain fortresses and pushing toward the normal march lane of everything his people assassination the earth could be. The viewer must not feel like did the crossing. This is one. In 3026 BC at the Hydaspes River, Alexander faced king to one of the most dangerous battlements of his life. Through the storm, mud, Granicus across the river, to even the monsters of India, from military and discipline could be battlefied weapons system that feels almost unnatural. The key is terror, mud, soundless panic, and nightmare. At the Achaemenid River in 356 BC, for the first time in his life, refused army Alexander to go farther. He raged at the edge of the unknown world, but even he couldn't force exhausted men to march forever, and so he turned back, leaving behind cities, forts, and the unfinished wound of a world could not swallow. In 3025 BC, Alexander led his army through the deadliest marches and wars of his life. Men died of thirst, the land devoured thousands, and yet he walked beside them, refusing water, turning even suffering itself into a weapon of command. In 3024 BC, at Susa, Alexander forced thousands into mass marriage, fused east and west beneath his rule. It was not romance, it was social engineering by empire, when he was already planning new conquest, because even after swallowing continents, his hunger had not begun to die. His hunger is still alive. In June 323 BC, Alexander fell silent in Babylon and fought death for 12 days. And when his generals asked who should inherit the empire, he answered with one word so violent, it outlived him, the strongest. In June 3023 BC, Alexander silent in Babylon and fought death for 12 days. And when his generals asked who should inherit the empire, he answered with one word so violent it outlived him, the strongest.